I'm excited to share with you Telling Power, my business storytelling course. By business storytelling, I mean everything that has to do with communication at work. This is a monster. It's over 2 hours and 40 minutes long. And I created this course in 2023 for my premium tier of clients. And today, I'm very happy to share it with the world. What you will find are 5 modules. In the first one, short and sweet, I will share 4 principles of great communication. In the second module, called Behind the Scenes, we will prepare before we meet our audience. In the third module, called Center Stage, we will go where we belong, under the spotlight and center stage. And there, we will follow a proven storytelling structure that I've been using with my clients for over 2 decades. Once you're an expert in that sort of storytelling, you can explore Module 4, the shape of story. Here, through examples, we will explore what it means to really leverage storytelling. And that will prepare us for Module 5. Module 5 is really the advanced module. We're going to explore imposter syndrome. We're going to see what are the dimensions of communication styles. And then I'm going to give you a self-assessment over almost 30 dimensions of thinking, feeling, and being, where you're going to understand what are the aspects of communication where you need to improve. Throughout the course, I will reference some materials. I've collected them all in a package, and you can find the resource package below. And if I mention the group, the community in the videos, just translate that into comments and just use the comments to respond and to share what I'm asking you to share in the videos. And these are not videos that were meant for YouTube originally, so I'm never going to invite you to like, subscribe, and comment. So why don't you do it right now? Finally, explore the rest of the channel, Think with Matteo Cassese. You'll find lots of resources on entrepreneurship, mindset, and I think you'll find some great talks as well that you're going to enjoy, even just as examples of great communication. So now I leave you with 2 hours and 38 minutes of business storytelling training. Let's start with 4 principles. These are 4 fundamental principles that will allow you to start your journey in business storytelling. Now, for the first principle, we need to flip the perspective. We're always thinking about ourselves when we communicate, but we are not that important. The interesting perspective when we are communicating is, what is our audience getting? When our audience listens to our message, there's one thing on their mind. And it's like a mantra if you are into meditation. They're repeating it constantly. And that is, what's in it for me? Is that bad or good? That's great. Your audience is selfish. They want something from you. They want information, but not just that. They want status. They want money. They want recognition. They want to gain something. They want to have something that they can use for themselves. Your audience wants you to speak to them. And the way you do that is by addressing this fundamental question. Principle number 1 is respond to the question that your audience is asking you. What's in it for me? Let's go to principle number 2. When I ask you, let's prepare a presentation, get me a presentation done by tomorrow, what do you think? What's the first thing on your mind? If you're like me, this is what happens. You get stuck in your ego. You start saying, oh, I must, I should be eloquent, I should come across as knowledgeable, I should use the right words, I need the right effects, the right visuals, and we get completely stuck with this I trip. It's overwhelming. There are so many things stacked against us that we cannot succeed. We cannot look good and be eloquent and come across as knowledgeable, but also friendly, we're going to fail on some of these aspects. Why is that? Communication is not about you. What is communication about? Let's try and see what communication is about through a very simple experiment. Now, I'm going to use a graph here, and I'm going to start with I. I'm going to communicate with these pronouns and see how effective it is. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to create this content for you. I'm stoked that I get to download everything that I know on storytelling into this course. As you can see, I can make it engaging with my body language, with my voice, but it's very much an ego trip. Not so interesting. We are a community of business storytellers. We are committed to improving. We are going to go to great heights through this coaching. A little bit better, but there's a lot of I in we. It's not that great. Let's go a step further. Let's talk about business storytelling. How business storytelling is not just a way of putting anecdotes inside our communication. Business storytelling is a way of structuring something that has a clear beginning, then it has a middle that adds value, and then it has a clear ending with next steps and to-dos. If I talk about it works a little bit better. Let's go a step further. You are the one that are on the journey. You're the ones that are curious about this. You're the ones that are getting to know business storytelling, and you are the ones that are going to do great things with the new communication skills that you get. You see how much better it works once I get and I step up to you? And so this is principle number 2. Always start with your audience. Don't get stuck in the ego trip. Let's go to the third principle. And we're going to start asking questions and see what are the questions that lead to the best storytelling. Now we can start with the basic questions, when it happened, where it happened, but it's not very engaging. These are very matter-of-fact kind of answers that we get from when and where. Now there is a step up from that, and that is what. As we saw before, it could be interesting. What is business storytelling? And what is business storytelling? Is a way of organizing first your thoughts and then your communication. So what is a little bit better than that? Then we get to who. Now, who is a little bit more intriguing? Who is it that is telling this story? Who is it that benefits this story? Who's involved? These are people, these are groups, these are tribes. We love social connection. We are automatically more connected to the who than the what or the when and the where. But let's get to the real storytelling, adverbs. Now the first one is why. And you should use it, as coaches use why, many times. Why is that? And why is that? And why is it that a fact packaged into a story works better than just a fact? Why? And there's another adverb that works even better than why. Once I've established that my audience is interested in the who and in the why, I can take in really deep into the how. And a lot of times we forget that for the things where we are experts, we are the only ones, or nearly the only ones, that can explain what happens behind the scenes. What is the how? How is the sauce being prepared? How is it being made? And so these are the adverbs, and these are the questions that you need to ask in order to get great storytelling. And so principle number 3 is focus on why and how. The theory behind principle number 4 is very deep. This is why we're going to touch this principle through an example. Now, when we are communicating, there isn't just the message, we're also creating a relationship. And in this graph at the top, I'm mapping the relationship and I'm having the increase, the positive of the relationship on this side and the negative of the relationship on this side, and then the message. What happens when I am teaching, for instance? So when I am teaching, I am increasing my message points. But at the same time that I'm increasing my message points, I'm increasing my relationship points. I'm building a relationship with you by helping you, by giving you something of value. Now, if at some point I decide to ask for something, so let's say that I'm not teaching and I'm asking you to go on LinkedIn and to tell your friends that there is this amazing course called Telling Power. I'm going into the negative of the message. I'm not giving, I'm taking, I'm asking. And what happens is that my relationship points are becoming lower. Now, I'm not losing proportionally, but let's say that I get very demanding and I constantly ask and I don't give anything in return. What can happen is that by having negative equity in my message, I'm getting also negative equity in my relationship. This is just a practical way of seeing this principle. Every time we communicate with other people, we are accompanying our message with a relationship message, with a relationship value. And so principle number 4 is that the relationship and the message always go hand in hand. Let's summarize this module. We started by flipping the perspective and starting with what's in it for me. Address this important question. Respond to this question at the beginning of your talk. And we're going to see that once we are preparing for center stage, exactly step by step, how do I respond to what's in it for me? The second principle is to start with your audience, start with you. Communicate always with you. It doesn't matter the I, it doesn't matter the we. The what is somewhat relevant, but you is super powerful. And then once you started communicating with your audience, engage them through the 2 storytelling questions. Why? And if they're interested in the why, tell them the how. Okay, if they're not into the why, don't go into the details of the how. And finally, with every message, there is a relationship value and then there is the actual message. This is the first practical activity that I invite you to do. It's first of all a reflection. I would like you to think about the obstacles that you have right now with your communication. What is holding you back? What is something that really doesn't work? What is an obstacle in the way? Try to be precise. Try to be as practical as possible. Now, one of the obstacles that, for instance, I had throughout my own career was the fact that I got always very anxious in front of many people. And I had an issue dealing with larger crowds. And this anxiety would give me less clarity in what I was going to say. So if I were to do this exercise, I would think into those details and detail what are the situations where I encountered obstacles to communication. Now, another part of this activity is thinking about your goals. Where do you need to communicate better? How will you use these new business storytelling skills? Again, be precise. Tell me with whom you want to communicate. Where is that happening? Is that a virtual meeting? Is that an in-person meeting? About what are you going to talk? And how do you want to change your audience? We'll see later on. A lot of our communication uses storytelling because we want there to be a before and an after. And so be precise. And the way we do this activity is actually on School, where you create a new post, you title it Obstacles and Goals, and you go ahead and you tell us these things. And most probably what's going to happen is that you're already going to get some hints, some tips and tricks from the coaches and from the rest of the community. Welcome behind the scenes. Now the process becomes practical. I invite you to click the link that you find below this video and load the Miro board that is going to accompany us throughout this and the next module. It looks like this. You'll see that we have more or less the same shape repeated 4 times. This shape is the process, is the 8 steps behind the scenes and the 8 steps center stage. In the first version, you have a clean version where you can add your own narrative. But most importantly, this is where we're going to work within this reference guide version. And in this reference guide version, where you can see that all the behind the scenes has some tooltips, some guides that will allow you to create your own behind the scenes. Now, this is all the theory, but I've also provided you, and we're going to cross-reference the whole time, 2 examples. The first example sees a coach like me in a startup incubator presenting to startups and talking about storytelling. So in this example, you will see what are the challenges of an expert. And in this other example, I will be a startup founder myself, and I'll try to pitch my startup to investors. And so we're going to see what are the challenges of an entrepreneur that needs to get funding. But in order to get going, I think it's best that we reference and we make an ideal arc to the principles that we saw in the previous module. In this behind the scenes process, we will address what's in it for me, start with the audience, and relationship and message. So these 3 principles will become real in this part of the work, and the why and the how belong to center stage. I want to first of all have you have a look at this process as a whole, and so you can see that we have 3 different moments here. There is one moment right at the top where we have a goal. Now, this goal is deeply related with our content. Then we have a section in the middle, and this section in the middle is about building a persona. So it's completely decoupled, it's completely detached from our goal. And then we have a section at the bottom where we have before and after. And here our content plugs in again. Okay, so we have content, no content, content again. I think this is really important for us to frame right from the onset. Now let's get rid of these annotations, and then we can go ahead and look at the core aspect of this work. Now the core aspect here is to clearly state what is the goal of our communication. So in this case, I suggest a format where we have the speaker, let's say Matteo, brings the topic, let's say brings storytelling to the financial tech world, the fintech world. So this could be a very good goal. And then let's have a look at our examples. Do they have a clear goal? Let's scroll down and let's have a look at the various examples. So here we have a coach at an innovation hub presenting storytelling to startups. Who? Where even? What? For whom? For what audience? And then let's look at our entrepreneur. An entrepreneur pitches startup to VCs. Very clear. This is the beginning of the process. Now it's time for us to build a persona. What kind of persona do we need? We need a persona to represent the audience. We are not trying to map the hero or the topic, we're trying to map the audience. And it might happen that we will need more than one persona to represent the whole audience. And most of the time, we will have to use our imagination. We will have to imagine what this ideal audience persona thinks, feels, strives for, has for a name and core values. But we'll see that in detail in a second. Other times we might already know what the audience persona is, and sometimes we might even use some research tools like LinkedIn to find out more about the person we're going to talk to. Let's start the process of building this persona. And I would say the first step would be to give this persona a name, to give them an age, maybe a country of residence, and a job title. Okay, this would really help. Just naming them would really help referencing them later on. Let's look at our examples. We have a coach speaking to startups, and so we have a startup founder here as the audience persona. It's Anna, 30 years old, from Berlin, startup founder. Very simple. And in the other case, when we are a startup but we are pitching to a VC, we have Claire, in her 40s, from London, junior partner at a VC firm. Now the next two steps that we have once we have a name is to dig into home and work. Why would we want to do that? And why would we want to go home? Right? We want to have an image of this person. We want to have the feeling that if we met this person, we would have something to talk about. Not just about what happens at work, but also what happens at home. So what would you want to map? I would suggest to, for instance, map, first of all, the core relationships, and then understand if this person has hobbies and passions and how do they spend their free time. In general, what is their lifestyle like? Are they very sporty? Are they very sedentary? Do they like to travel? Do they like to renovate their home? And what are their attitudes towards life? This is easier shown through our example. We have our startup founder, Anna. Now, Anna is a cat person. She's single, queer, a computer nerd, a pretty introverted person, but also loves to party. She's vegan. She's very active. She's a triathlete. And she's also very active in the way that she moves around quite a bit. She's still looking to find her place. So as you can see, there's quite a few things here that we can connect with while we develop our narrative. Let's look at Claire. Now Claire, instead, is married, has one kid, loves to cycle with the whole family, is a tennis player, has a very quirky hobby, woodworking. In the household there is a dog, and she is left, but now lefty-leaning conservative. Also here we start to have a better picture of who Claire is. Let's go back to the theory and let's go to work. Now, if we look at work, there's a few things that are pretty universal and clear. What is the role that this person has at work? What is their job title? What is their career path? Then what are their attitudes? Are they more of an emotional, analytical person? Are they a team player? Are they more working on their own? Are they very creative? Are they very methodical? Are they all of these things all together? Because one thing doesn't exclude the other. And then knowledge. What are the hard skills that they have? What is something that really sets them apart from the rest of the world? And then the dynamic of work is also really important. So what are they aspiring to? Where do they want to go? And what are they struggling with? As you can see, our work is much more than simply our job description. And let's look at our examples to make this point more clear. So if we look at Anna, our startup founder, she's an engineer, she's still studying, she has a PhD in progress, and she's a third-time founder. She's part of an accelerator program, and she's a very detail-oriented person with very strong deep domain knowledge. But what is happening in her work environment? Well, she's looking for a co-founder, so she's in need of communication, and she's having some struggle recruiting. There's quite a few things I can connect with in a narrative where I'm going to talk about business storytelling. Let's look at Claire, the VC. Now, when we analyze the VC, we see a more established person who has a formal education in finance. He's analytical. It's also a traditional kind of approach to finance, a former trader, trusted in our community, somebody who's already got a status, who wants to eventually create her own fund, who is connected to the performance of the fund, and for whom time is money. So with this picture of a name, home, and work, you can start seeing how our persona is shaping up. In this video, we'll talk about fears, hopes, and core values. They are all very much linked together. Now, speaking of fears, I'm not thinking about the fears that we all share. And speaking of hopes, it's the same thing. We all hope for good health and prosperity. We all fear disconnection. We all fear catastrophe. But what are the distinct fears that, for instance, our persona feels more than other people? So what are the specific things that they would like to avoid, or the specific headwinds that they are encountering in this phase of their life? Let's go to our examples to make this point more clear. The first example is our startup founder. So they are worried that they are going to be irrelevant, that they are not going to find their place in the startup and in the work ecosystem. They went for the difficult way to start working, right? The easy way is to get a job. They decided to become a founder. And they fear irrelevance. And they also fear that in a status quo that is not changing, in a situation that is static, they will not find their place. Now, this is very different from what we will see from our VC. So our VC has already established her reputation in the market, in the specific industry she's working in. And so she fears losing that. And another thing, as a parent and as an investor, she also sees climate change as one of the biggest and most important obstacles that she may encounter throughout her life to reach her goal and to be healthy and prosperous and to leave a healthy and prosperous planet for a child. As you can see, even though we all fear the same things, in different phases of our lives and in different situations, some specific fears emerge, and they tell us a lot about what kind of person we are dealing with. Let's go back to the theory and let's talk about hopes. A lot of times these hopes are symmetrical to the fears. So what is the wind that we have on our tail that is bringing us to a new phase in our lives? And what what do we want to achieve? What are we striving for? Not just in our work, not just in our day-to-day, but in general, as a person, as a human being, where are we going? And let's look at the examples. Well, for a startup founder, the question is, will I be relevant? Will I have influence? And so our startup founder hopes that she will have influence, but also their hopes are connected with this high risk, high reward road that she has taken. She's decided to skip the easy way, to go on the hard way, hoping that there is a disproportionate reward in that direction. And if we look at our VC, well, they want to gain independence. They have been dependent from the stock market first and now a VC firm. How about going completely independent and maybe this dream of an all-female planet-friendly fund? Why not? Female investors, female partners, climate-friendly. And then she's hoping what every VC or every partner at a VC firm hopes, to find the next unicorn, to not go 1x, not go 5x, not go 10x, go 100x. So this is how the hopes can start shaping an image of this person that goes beyond what we could see superficially. And this allows us to dive into the core values. What is it that motivates them? Where do they derive meaning? What are your core values? Think about that for a second. I'm sure that these core values emerge in everything you do. So let's look at our examples. Freedom, very simply. Why choose the hard way where there's a simpler way? Why go all in with entrepreneurship? Why risk everything for a higher value, freedom? And how about our VC? Planet and profit, bringing these two things together, bringing the world of finance and sustainability together. These are the core values of our examples. And this helps us round up this image, and at this point we can start plugging in our contents. Now we have a persona. We might need more than one, and if we need more than one, we will just copy paste this, because maybe sometimes we're speaking to marketing, but at the same time we're going to be speaking to operations. And in this case, we might build a couple of personas. And remember, we haven't thought about our content yet. We have been mapping our audience personas as they are, not in relationship to the content that we bring. It's time for us to plug our contents back in and talk about the before and after. When we recruit storytelling or business storytelling, we do it because we believe that there is a before our message and there is an after our message. That something changes when people encounter our communication. What does this mean practically? Well, before, our audience feels in a certain way and thinks in a certain way in regards to the topic. They have a certain type of connection to the topic, and they have a certain type of relationship with the speaker or speakers in front of them. This is the status quo. And then there is a change. And in the after, they feel and they think in a different way. They have a different connection with the topic, and they have a different relationship with the speaker or speakers. So there's something before and something after. But let's look at our examples to make it very, very clear. At the beginning, our startup founder, we know that she's very analytical. She's an engineer, she's very factual, and she likes to communicate with facts and numbers, and believes that storytelling is important, but for somebody else, for marketing, and it's just a fancy name for telling anecdotes. Where do we want to bring her? We don't want to change her basic beliefs. We want to persuade her that she wants to weave the facts and numbers she strongly believes in into a story. And also that storytelling is a skill for a founder, and that when she wants to communicate with other people, she can use storytelling, because storytelling is the structure of all good communication. You can see how we connected her views before with the change that we want to bring afterwards. Let's look instead at the case of convincing the fund. Now, the fund sees us at the beginning as a small-time investment. They are looking into us, they are giving us a space to pitch, but we're not so important for them. This is the before. In the after, are they directly giving us money? Are they funding us straight away? Not really. There's something more subtle that needs to change. They need to understand that we're worthy over their time and attention. And then they need to make this project their own, to pitch it internally to the other partners. We need internal buy-in, and then we can get into the process of investment. You can see that starting to think about your communication in terms of who am I communicating to? Personas. And then what is the change that needs to happen before and after is already helping us get out of our heads. And inside our heads, there's all of our problems. And inside the heads of our audience, that's where we want to plant our seed, and that's where our communication ends, and that's where we should be as well. In order to familiarize ourselves with this process, what I suggest as a second activity of this course is to map yourself with the persona framework. This means ignoring the before and after, and ignoring the goal, but focusing on this area and creating on a separate Miro board. You can duplicate this board and you will bring in everything that is in here already. Map your own home, work, fears, hopes, and core values, and try to get familiar with this process. Once you're ready, you can create a post with my own persona as the subject and post it to the community. Welcome center stage. Load the Miro at the link below. I'm also going to share it on screen with you. And let's head over to the center stage section in the clean version of our board. Now, what I want to show you before we enter into the 8 discrete videos for the 8 discrete steps that are of this journey, I would like to show you how these steps are divided into 3 groups. Now, there is one group over here. And this first group is all about motivation, because at the beginning, whenever I encounter a new narrative, whenever I encounter a new communication, I need to be motivated to follow, first of all. And this brings me from who you are, why you're there, and why your audience is there. Now then, we have a second step that I'm going to do in red. And this steps goes all the way to here. And that is the journey. Now, the journey is what takes me into the core of storytelling. Once I've motivated my audience to actually follow me, I'm gonna bring them a change. I'm gonna deal with the reaction of that change, and then I'm gonna climb all the way to the big idea. Now, after this has been done, and again, we're gonna go into all of the minute details of all of this, I need to allow my audience to go back home. And I do that through the conclusion, and the conclusion is in 2 simple steps. And what this corresponds to, all of these aggregates correspond to, are actually the 3 acts of every story. So let's see. This is the 3rd act, the return home. And then we have in red the 2nd act, which is the road of trials and the moment where the heroine or the hero has to deal with the big villain and the big problem of the story. And then we have the 1st act, and this is the 1st act, is the moment where we get to know the characters and we understand what is the setup, but also there is what's called an inciting incident. There is something that happens that is breaking the status quo and is forcing our characters to start a journey. So this gives you a little bit of a reference, and now we are going to work actually in this part of the mirror board. And everything, it's important that from now on, everything we do is about what we show, what we tell, how we build our argument. As we were behind the scenes, we were in preparation, and this material is something that was for us. Now, the material that we prepare here is the material for our audience. In the first step of our storytelling journey, we have to talk about ourselves. Now, we started by saying we shouldn't have an ego, but actually, if we don't have an ego at all, we are not going to be able to bring value to our audience. Now, this is the only moment where we are talking about ourselves, but we're doing it with a very specific goal in mind. Our goal is to help our audience place us on a map and respond to the question, who are you? Who are we? Who is the presenter? So we don't want to give them our background. Okay? We don't want to look backwards. A lot of presenters even do a step back when they have to talk about their background. But we want to give them a dynamic intro. What do I mean by a dynamic intro? It is an intro that is about your relationship with the topic, what you are going to do in the future, and not even just what you're going to do, but what you're going to do for your audience and with your audience. Fortunately, we have good examples, so let's go to our 2 examples. The first example, you know it very well, it's me presenting storytelling to startups. And so how do I introduce myself? I tell them I'm Matteo, I'm your business storytelling coach. I also tell them I'm not such the stereotypical coach. I'm quite different from the usual coach. And then I go on telling them a bit of my story, that I'm an introvert with a tech background. And I oftentimes will use this test that I went through, where on a scale from 0 to 10, I scored a 5 in my communication skills, and I will use this to help my audience identify the fact that I have been struggling with my communication skills for a lot of my life. And so this is how I introduce myself in the case of this pitch to startups about storytelling. But let's introduce ourselves as the entrepreneur. So in this case, what I'm going to do is going to tell my role. First of all, it helps the audience understand who we are. My role as a CEO of YogaWare, in this case, a fictional company. And I'm passionate about helping others with tech. And I am a nerd, and I'm very much into the tech part, but I have a passion for the business. And we will see throughout this presentation that this theme of helping people and being interested in creating business model will be a crucial theme for the development of this storyline. So this first step is to tell our audience who we are, not with our whole background, with a dynamic self-intro that helps them place us on a map. In step number 2, we want to answer the question, why are you there? Why are we there as presenters? We are still in this area of storytelling that is called motivation. We are still trying to convince our audience that they showed up. Now it's worth it to listen. So how do we get them invested? What we can do is to, for instance, show what is our relationship with the topic. What is our angle? What is our perspective? What is it that we bring uniquely to this topic? And also we can take advantage of human empathy. And if we care deeply about the topic that we're going to talk about, our audience will care about this topic as well. And once we have established this relationship between us and the change that we want to bring, we are also going to start teasing the change that is coming. Change is going to be step number 4. But anticipation is a great way of dealing with the motivation of our audience. Let's look at our example. I was introducing myself as a storytelling expert, and why was I there? Because since I was struggling with my own communication, I am in the perfect position to help others communicate better. So it's a very, very simple transition here between a dynamic bio, I'm struggling, I have been struggling, and I have found solutions, and therefore I'm here to help you communicate better. Let's look at this in the investor pitch. What is our role as an entrepreneur? We want to optimize. We want to find opportunities to optimize and capture that value, help people with technology, and invent, create. So we are establishing our relationship with the material, with the pitch that we're going to deliver based on our passion for finding problems and solving these problems by inventing solutions. And here we are using, finally, the adverb that is the guide to good communication and to good storytelling, why. Whenever we are in doubt how to go next in storytelling, you ask your question, why? And the answer to why is usually a very interesting story that you can tell your audience. In the third step of our storytelling journey, we are going to start addressing our audience. What we want to do is to tell our audience why they are there. Respond to this question, why is your audience there? We have the possibility to program our audience and to tell them what to think. And this proves to be pretty powerful. So we can give our audience an active role within our presentation. We can give them assignments. We can ask them to think about something, for instance. And we need to address the fact that, as we know, our audience is asking themselves, what's in it for me? And how do we address this what's in it for me? We are going to explain how our communication is going to impact and help them solve their problems and help them make better decisions. This is also a great moment to pause for a second and help your audience understand how you are going to structure your talk. I don't mean giving them an agenda. If you give them an agenda right at the beginning, they are not going to understand all the points that you want to follow and why you want to follow that order. But what I do at the beginning of any presentation is to give the audience an idea of how we're going to use the time together. So for instance, if we have 30 minutes together, I will tell them, I'm going to tell you 3 stories in these 30 minutes. And our audience is smart, is going to think, oh, every 10 minutes, there's going to be a new story. And actually what I do oftentimes is, again, I will use some kind of diagram like this and say, you know, we're going to have these stories, and then let's say we're going to have a moment for Q&A. So this is a great moment to have this clarification with your audience, to help them have a guide and to agree with them how you're going to use the shared time. The fact that when we communicate, we use other people's time, it's really important. And if you give them the key to how time is going to be used throughout the presentation, you help them be in control and you help them actually relax and follow you. And finally, how do we end this section around motivation? We started before, in the step before, we already teasing what needs to change. Now we start to demonstrate this change. We start actually bringing the change in. We're going to talk about the change in a second, but first, let's look at it through our examples. In my example about storytelling, I will say something along the lines, while I talk, I would like you to think about your own communication challenges. For instance, do you have difficult conversations, or do you have an upcoming talk or a tense negotiation? And so when I talk, don't think about the theory that I'm talking about. Think about the practice of how you can use what I'm going to say specifically for your purposes. And you can see that here, it really pays off if I know my audience, because I'm going to know what they care about and I'm going to be able to help them really well in this step. Then I'm also going to give them an instruction manual on how to use me as their coach. So for instance, I'm going to ask them to interrupt me as much as possible. And then I'm going to introduce this idea of talking about storytelling. And for instance, one way that I introduce this idea very, very often is talking about canvases. Like for instance, we are very used to using canvases like the business model canvas, or systems like lean startup, or theories like UX design or service design. And they're all based on the idea that we're going to have feedback and we're going to cycle through feedback and we're going to get results. So all of these are really powerful frameworks, and these frameworks are guiding our work in all different fields. But then communication comes, and when we need to communicate, there's no framework. We just wing it. There must be a better way. And this is how I introduce the change. I create the desire, the necessity for that change before I introduce the change. So see how many things you can do just in this area of motivating the audience. Let's see what I would do instead as an entrepreneur trying to pitch the venture capitalist. So here, I want to hone in on my audience. And my audience is there to find the next unicorn, to understand a new solution and discover a new opportunity. I want to make it very clear for my VC audience that I know what they're looking for. I know what they need to find out of a meeting like that. And so I address their needs like this, saying, I see you. I know that you're looking for these things in a pitch. And then I tease the continuation. Today, I want to talk to you about growth. And in this case, what I'm doing with growth here is I'm doing another powerful thing that we knew in communication and storytelling, and I am using a frame. So instead of specifying what kind of growth I'm talking about, I am appealing to the concept of growth that my audience has in their minds. And this can be pretty powerful. For instance, I can do it with you, introducing a frame in your mind. And after introducing this frame will stay with you for quite a long time, because it's impossible. You cannot not think of the elephant, right? Once I say elephant, the frame of elephant is in your mind. And this is the power that we have with our words in the motivation section of our presentation to get our audience committed to what we're going to say next. And what we're going to say next is probably the most important part of our presentation. We are leaving the motivation part of our presentation and we're entering into the journey. In the journey, the first question that we need to answer is what needs to change? What is it that is different between before and after our presentation? Now, fortunately, we are very familiar with the before and after because we worked on it separately behind the scenes. Now we have to exemplify this change center stage. What will the people that don't attend miss? Now we're going to bring a change, but it's not that there is just one change throughout our presentation. We have a little call out here that brings us all the way here to a slightly different shape, right? In this shape, yes, we have a motivation at the beginning, but then we have lots of moments of change and lots of moments of idea before we get to the big idea. And so you can see that we go on and on trying to bring smaller change until a big change sinks in as the big idea. This will become a little bit clearer as we go through the different examples. What is the kind of change that we are going to bring about? Well, there's quite a few. So for instance, a lot of times we are giving a presentation or giving a talk because we have to introduce a new idea. Sometimes we're talking one-on-one with a person because we want to instill a doubt. We don't want them to think the way they think. Or we want to talk about something that they know very well, but we want to change how they feel about that. Again, we want to talk about something that they know very well, but we want to change the point of view. We want them to look at things in a different perspective. Oftentimes we switch on our communication channels, especially marketing and advertising, because we want to create a desire. And in situations like this one, we have a change. It's an important change. I'm giving you this storytelling framework for you to use. So this is the big change. This is not just my framework, it becomes our shared framework. Let's see the examples. So how would I deal with change if I was talking about storytelling with a startup? Let's have a look. So I was teasing this by telling my story about frameworks. We have frameworks for everything, but we don't have frameworks for communication. And then I bring the change. Business storytelling is that framework. And today I want to tell you the most powerful principle about this framework. And I decide to do just one step of the whole mountain together with this client. And the step is one of the most difficult steps of storytelling. I go ahead and tell her a good story is only as good as its villain. And I introduce this complicated concept of how villains play a really important role in the way we make our narratives interesting. And we'll clarify this in the next step together. And I go on building my argument by saying, even though villains are so important, when we communicate in business, we want to take any problem, any issue out of the question. But the only way to get people interested is if we feed them problems and then we help them solve those problems. You can see here that I am struggling because I'm bringing a new idea. I'm bringing something different. And my audience is not going to be automatically convinced. We don't wake up in the morning thinking, I would like people to change how I think, feel, what I know about the world. And so there is a counterpoint to all of this. We'll be there in a second, but first let's look at our VC example. Now, in the VC example, I was leading up by setting this frame of growth. And then I tell them, well, our company, yoga, helps customers grow their yoga studios. And they have a subscription with us where we help them grow their yoga studios. And as their yoga studios grow, their subscription costs grow proportionally. And we help the customers focus on what's important and go about automating all of the things that are not their core business. So we automate anything that has to do not with yoga. Everything that has to do with yoga, they focus on, and billing and customer service and legal and admin. This is what we do so that they can focus on what they do best. So this is the change that this fictional startup is bringing in the world. So in this case, what needs to change is the status quo is a yoga owner has to deal with everything. And in this case, what I'm bringing about is a service that takes all of the heavy lifting out of the equation and makes it simple for the yoga owner to focus on what they do best. This might be the most important step of them all. We need to answer the question, what are the reactions to this change? We really are in the middle of the journey, and if you look at our diagram, this is the only moment where we are heading down. We are downhill. Instead, we want to climb. We want to climb to the big idea. What is the problem? The problem is that our audience is made of individuals and everyone is different and nobody's going to be convinced by the same argument. Also, if our ego is front and center, we will evaluate every single reaction from our audience. And we will take it personally, like, oh, now they stopped listening. Oh, now they got distracted. Oh, now they have a contrarian body language, and so on and so forth. And we will take these as judgments about ourselves. What is really happening is that everybody is just expressing themselves throughout our communication. And we are not going to please everyone. And we are not going to please everyone in every single moment. Therefore, it's not important their reaction in every second. Let's look at some of the reactions that we typically get. And now I'm thinking, especially talking from the stage, having 100 people or 150 people in the audience. Who are we going to recognize in this audience? We will have some people that are constantly confused. They're like, new thing, we don't like that. We're gonna have some people that we know, some people that love us, and they were always gonna be our fans. Whatever we say, they're gonna be in favor. And there's other people that are always going to be contrarians. And then we have the swingers, and they are going to go from agreeing with us and then agreeing also with a counterpoint made by another speaker. So they are happy with any idea. And there's a lot of people in the audience that are just looking for the networking that is happening later on, or some interesting, brainy tidbit that they can tweet or share on social media. So there's a lot of these reactions, and we cannot take care of all of these reactions all of the time. But if we are smart, we can start integrating some of these reactions into our narrative. We could answer some of these questions in advance and start understanding that for our audience it's pretty hard to deal with this change, and start supporting them. In the example that I was talking about before, so the example where I am talking about storytelling, sorry if this is becoming very meta at this point, the change was really about this point of reactions. So I was bringing about a change by telling my audience, consider that you need villains in order for your narratives to work. This is the most difficult point to understand because it's the most counterintuitive if we think of successful communication. If we think about a fairy tale, we cannot have a fairy tale without a villain. If we think about a movie, or for instance a superhero movie, we cannot have Batman without the Joker. We cannot have Harry Potter without Voldemort. They would be really boring stories. And it's really hard, though, to make this parallel between Harry Potter without Voldemort. Oh, obvious that it's a boring coming-of-age story without the threatening power of a supervillain, to, oh, I want a supervillain in my presentations as well. But let's see now the examples. How do I deal with it in the case where I'm talking to the startup person about storytelling? Because I'm addressing here quite a few different things. So the first thing is, I'm suggesting to this person to embed problems in their narrative, and they're thinking, well, the last thing I need is more problems. And then I start playing this up and saying, but aren't you an entrepreneur because you love solving hard problems? You actually chase problems in order to find a good enough problem to build a business around it. You would hate a world without problems. And what I want to do is convince you that when you talk, if you give to your audience a hard enough problem to chew on, you will have their attention and you will engage them. And since we're talking about audience, let's face it, we all have a mighty supervillain in communication. And this mighty supervillain, we just saw it here. We have been spending a lot of time in this area here of the presentation. Why did we have to motivate our audience to follow us? Because we have a supervillain that is called attention. If we don't constantly capture the attention of our audience, we are going to lose them. And so see, adding problems, adding these supervillains to your presentations actually makes sense. And what I do by dealing with this is I start building these notes here that are climbing on the way to the big idea. And so every time you communicate, you have multiple of these villains, and you can integrate the feedback and the reactions of your audience into your narrative, giving energy to your narrative. And if you do this, this is what other founders are doing in their pitches, integrating the pushback that they will get from the venture capitalist directly into their narrative. So as you can see, I'm using these two moments. I'm using change and the reactions to build this sort of extra section of the presentation where I'm leading up to the big idea. Let's look now, let's work on the VC pitch, because right now we have introduced our business here. We introduced a business that is growing with their customers, but then the VC has other things on her mind, and she is going to tell us, well, the barriers for entry in your market are too low, the market is too small, the competition is too fierce, and other SaaS solutions could be in that space. And these are all the elements that need to be part of a successful pitch, or need to be answers that are ready for the questions that you are going to get from the venture capitalist at the end of your pitch. And as you can see here, there is a very, very simple outcome of winning this resistance, is that we are weaving a story, but this is a story based on numbers. And we believe that our numbers, our growth numbers, and the growth of our company and our customers are good enough to get to the big idea. And so don't get carried away. Now is the time to use as few words as possible, and make sure that you begin ending your talk, ending your communication. You've made your point, don't belabor it. Let's see some of the examples to make this point clear. So this call out here is time to repeat the change. You see, it's just calling out to the change that was introduced in the previous step of the storytelling structure. So when we are trying to convince the startup founder to use storytelling, I just let her imagine what would happen if, when she's talking about the company to venture capitalists, or she's talking about the company to her customers, she has the power to weave facts into story. And I invite her to start leveraging storytelling today. You see, it's nothing extraordinary, this big idea. It's only that all of the threads that we've pulled during the presentation, they are neatly coming together. And similarly, what we are doing in the venture capital pitch is that we're bringing together all of the numbers that matter the most. We're growing at a 10x rate. We don't have customers leaving us month by month. Our cost of acquisition is not through paid traffic. Our customers love the service, and our growth is worthy of your time. Our growth is worthy of you looking into this deeper. The change, the before and after that we have in this presentation, is just to get them to get to the next stage of evaluation. Obviously, we want funding, but it's not like in the first presentation we're going to ask them for money or discuss exactly the dilution and so on. And so in this sense, what we're trying to do is to align their agenda with our agenda. And the conclusion is our growth is worthy of your time. Now it's time to end. And so these are going to be the next two steps of the storytelling structure of center stage. You want to have your audience not only understand the change, and this is what is happening with a big idea, but you want them to remember this change. And yes, here you are allowed to have bullet points and an agenda slide. It's actually a reverse agenda. It's the summary, and now it makes sense. The agenda slide doesn't make sense at the beginning because you haven't done the journey, but it does make sense at the end. You are giving your audience a way to memorize the experience that they had. Think about all of the communication and all the presentations and all the videos that you watch every day. Do you remember every bit of them, or do you remember the ending? This is why it's really important to have a summary. So zoom out. And how do we zoom out in our examples? Now, the zoom out in the storytelling presentation is very simple. You can use a negative as a positive. You can use a villain as an ally in your communication. We made the point, and now we can just reiterate it in this ending. And again, the summary for our VC pitch: we have a proven concept, we grow, and we're ready to scale. Very simple formula for ending: a summary, and then we'll see the ending of our structure in the next video. We are in the conclusion phase of our structure. The last step is to answer a final question: are there to-dos? Our audience makes sense of the change in the big idea. They memorize the change in the summary, and finally, we can transform this change into action in the to-dos. So what is it that they can do differently from now on? How can they go back home? How can they go back to the office? How can they go back to the next meeting with something different? And whenever you can invite your audience to change the behavior, to have a next action, this is a great moment to do that. And if you think about the structure of a good meeting, for instance, a great meeting ends with great to-dos. And in our examples, these to-dos are pretty straightforward. So in the example of me talking about storytelling, I invite the startup founder to start leveraging storytelling every time they need to communicate, and inviting them to join Telling Power, my community for fearless storytellers. And how should they join? By booking a quick call with me. And how about the case of the VC pitch? We want them to dig deeper. And so we want to set a next meeting. It's a typical sales technique. Never end a meeting without a commitment. Let us provide an in-depth look at all the numbers, and let's meet with the partners. This is how we end. Before we conclude, I want to highlight some of the characteristics of this storytelling structure that might not be too evident to you right now. I think the first characteristic is that you can start wherever you want. The ending works best if you follow the 2 steps of the summary of the to-dos, but actually you are completely free once you know the logic of the structure to freestyle and do whatever you want. The other important aspect of this structure is that you are going to spend most of the time throughout a presentation bringing about different types of change for different type of audience members, and then dealing with the specific reactions that you get. And then bringing some change and dealing with the reactions, and bringing some change and dealing with the reactions. And you will have some smaller ideas, and then you're going to have a big idea. And this is where you're going to spend most of the time. You are going to be down here in the trenches dealing with the villains most of the time that you're communicating. And once you learn to enjoy that, you are going to be great, fearless communicators. Well done. You now have the storytelling structure that you need to communicate fluently. In the next module, we're actually going to go a little bit more in depth, and we're going to go a little bit more nerdy, but this is actually all you need. You can stop with the videos here and you can go ahead with the next activity. You are going to enjoy this next assignment. What I would like you to do is to provide a video. So we are not talking about just filling up this storytelling structure. We're actually talking about a video. And for this video, I would like you to just go ahead and give me the first and the second step of this journey. Tell me who you are and why you're here using a dynamic introduction. Go back to the first and the second step in the videos and see what I really meant about this dynamic introduction. I would love to see a video. You can host this video on Loom. You can host this video on YouTube if you want, and you can just link it as a new post in the community. Tell me who you are. Tell me why you're here. I'm really curious about that, and I would love to join you in the comments of these videos and review them together with you. Your next activity is related to your work. I don't know what is the next presentation that you need to create, but my invitation would be to test it out in the form of a full mirror board. So it's a mirror board that looks maybe like the pitch storytelling to startups example or the pitch startup to investors example. So I invite you to start with the goal, map the persona, do the before and after, and then go through all of the 8 steps of the storytelling journey. Create a mirror board, share this mirror board in the Telling Power community, and I look forward to reviewing it with you in the comments of the community. With this module, we go into the complementary, the optional, in-depth material for Telling Power. So if you have watched the previous modules, you can already start to apply all of the Telling Power method. What we're going to do from now on is to go into some topics a little bit more in depth. And what we're going to do today is use a new mirror board. You will find the link below. And in this mirror board, you will see there's different shapes for a story. And actually, we could call this the shape of story. What is the shape of a story? Let's get going and let's see how many shapes and what different shapes can a story take. You are all familiar with this shape because this is the shape we have used. Now here I've just changed the labels for practicality, but you know that we have a beginning, we have a moment where we have to bring about change, we have a moment where there is resistance to that change, and we spend most of the time in our presentation between these two moments. So if we were to imagine how an actual presentation goes, it could go something like this, and most of our time it's spent actually between these two moments, between the idea of changing somebody and then resistance. Now, what is another shape to look at this same thing? Now, this shape that we can see over here is the spark line. Now, the spark line from Nancy Duarte, and Nancy Duarte is one of the most important presentation experts in the world, and she's the founder and owner of a big agency that creates PowerPoint presentations for everybody around the globe. The spark line is very simple, and the spark line tells us that in every presentation there's just 2 moments. There is a moment where we anchor to reality and we show what is, and then there is a moment where we show a future vision, and that moment is what will be. And how we spend our time in our presentation is at the beginning of a presentation we will spend more time on the what is and a little bit of time on the what will be. And then going forward with our presentation, we'll spend more and more time in the what will be space. I think this needs a demonstration, and I will comment with you a couple of video clips. These are 1 minute, 1.5 minute clips where you can see a presenter using this anchoring to the what is and the what will be. The first clip we're going to watch is from the late Steve Jobs and the first introduction of the iPad. When the iPad was introduced, more or less the tablet category didn't exist, so there wasn't even a price anchoring, and now Jobs is introducing the price of the iPad for the first time. Let's roll this clip and let's
amazing product, tremendous breadth. What should we price it at? Well, if you listen to the pundits, we're going to price it at under $1,000, which is code for $999. When we set out to develop the iPad, we not only had very ambitious technical goals and user interface goals, but we had a very aggressive price goal, because we want to put this in the hands of lots of people. And just like we were able to meet or exceed our technical goals, we have met our cost goals. And I am thrilled to announce to you that the iPad pricing starts not at $999, but at just $499. $499.
I wanted to leave a little bit of applause here. Besides the whole showmanship, besides the whole stage presence, besides the effects, what is happening here? At the beginning, what we are faced with a question: how should we price this product? This is the question that we get, and then there is an anchoring. As in pricing terms, this is actually a price anchor, and Jobs says, the pundits say $999, and that's the what is. And once I give the anchor, then it's very, very simple to go to the what will be of the $499. Let's look at another example. Now this time we are in the middle, still Steve Jobs, we are in the middle of the introduction of the original iPhone. And now if me and you, we would present the iPhone knowing how cool it is, we would immediately show it. But that's not what happens with the presentation from Steve Jobs. There is another technique that is being used, and we're going to comment it in just a second. This clip is slightly longer. You will find the video links in the description of this video, because these videos I've just extracted some clips, but they are worth watching in their entirety.
With a revolutionary user interface is the result of years of research and development, and of course it's an interplay of hardware and software. Now, why do we need a revolutionary user interface? I mean, here's 4 smartphones, right? Motorola Q, the BlackBerry, Palm Treo, Nokia E62, the usual suspects. And what's wrong with their user interfaces? Well, the problem with them is really sort of in the bottom 40 there. It's this stuff right here. They all have these keyboards that are there whether you need them or not to be there. And they all have these control buttons that are fixed in plastic and are the same for every application. Well, every application wants a slightly different user interface, a slightly optimized set of buttons just for it. And what happens if you think of a great idea 6 months from now? You can't run around and add a button to these things. They're already shipped. So what do? It doesn't work because the buttons and the controls can't change. They can't change for each application, and they can't change down the road if you think of another great idea you want to add to this product. Well, how do you solve this? It turns out we have solved it. We solved it in computers 20 years ago. We solved it with a bitmap screen that could display anything we want, put any user interface up, and a pointing device. We solved it with the mouse, right? We solved this problem. So how are we going to take this to a mobile device? Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen.
We have to introduce a device that we know very well has a giant screen. But how do we do it? We start with the smartphone market. And so we show the devices. Then we have a little glimpse of how it works with the computer and the mouse. And then we are ready for the big reveal of a phone that is all screen. So me and you, instinctively, we would have jumped directly to showing the phone. Instead, in this presentation and throughout the 2007 presentation of the iPhone, you constantly see this anchoring to the what is and allowing us to understand the status quo in such detail that then we truly appreciate the innovation that is coming there. So the sparkline is a fantastic way of analyzing a talk that exists and making sure that when you create your presentations, you have enough anchoring between these two moments. And by the way, what happens between what is and what will be, it's obviously change. And so if we want to arc back to the structure that we know really well, this is actually this. So the sparkline lives exactly in our structure. Let me show you a little bit better. This bit here is actually this bit here. Okay? So let's have a look at another shape and see how this shape can also help us better understand our original structure. Now, this shape is the 3-act structure. And I think you've already heard about the 3-act structure. And anyway, you've read books, you watched movies, so you know all about this structure. What happens in the first act of a movie, of a show, of a book? We get to meet our characters. We get to meet our characters at a certain time and in a certain location. And we have them on a path. And that path is usually pretty boring. It's their ordinary life. But then something happens over the course of this first act, and they get some news. There's some new information. There's most probably somebody knocking at their door, and something changes, and they have to embark on a journey. And this journey is usually what happens in the second act, where they are faced with trials and problems and issues, and then there's a turmoil, there's new allies, old allies, tests, trials, until we get to a closing point between the second and the third act, where there is, in an action movie, there would be the big battle. In a romantic movie, there would be the wedding, and finally things are going towards a resolution. And then what happens in the third act is that while the heroine or the hero of this story would like to stay in this world of adventure here, in this world where all this stuff happens, actually in the third act they have to go back home. They have to go back to the location where they started. And the third act is also what helps us as a viewer to enjoy this return home. Now, to demonstrate how you begin and how you end, I want to show you a couple of other clips that I think will help you understand the power of the first act and the power of the third act. And if we are looking at the structure that we already know, let's use blue once again. This will be our first act. All of this will be our second act, and this will be our third act. So you can see that in the first act we have the beginning with motivation. In the second act we have the trials and the difficulties and the tribulations with change and resistance. And in the third act we get to insight, but then we need to end. And this is exactly what we're going to see in a second. So let's start with the ending. I'm going to show you a clip from a TED Talk, and this TED Talk is about the use of resources, and in this case it's about using the paper towels and how to dry your hands in the most efficient way. I've cut just the end of this. It's a 4-minute talk, and I invite you to watch all of it because it has so many interesting aspects there. But in the ending, the audience has understood the technique that the presenter is giving them, and he's sort of giving them an invitation to continue using, and to, once they go back home or the next time they go to the toilet, use this technique for themselves. Let's watch the clip. The audience already knows.
Now let's all say it together. Shake, fold. You will, for the rest of your life, remember those words every time you pick up a paper towel. And remember, 1 towel per person for 1 year, 571,230,000 pounds of paper. No small thing. And next year, toilet paper.
Again, the showmanship here is absolutely amazing, but for the rest of your lives, you will remember. So this is the total mastery of the third act that we saw here. But how do we instead start? What is a great example of a great start of a presentation? We will go to Greta Thunberg for her most famous presentation, where basically we all heard about her, and this is just the beginning. It's very, you can see it's delivered with a lot of emotion, and there's a couple of tricks that Greta uses to put us in the right mood and understand in the best possible way what she's going to talk about, and we'll comment this in just a second.
My message is that we'll be watching you.
Basically, the whole talk has already been delivered in these 10 seconds, but now let's continue watching.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
As you can see, Greta puts us immediately in the action by doing two things. So at the beginning, she's giving the final message, we'll be watching you, and then starts with her theme of how dare you. And if you think about the most famous speeches in history, for instance, I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King Jr., how dare you becomes her mantra, and she uses this how dare you continuously to empower her message even more. So this is a very masterful, very artful beginning for a very heartfelt and important message. Let's move to the last shape, and probably this is the most ancient shapes of the ones that we have seen today, because this is the shape that is coming from Joseph Campbell. And specifically, you will find this diagram in the hero's journey. The description of the hero's journey is part of the book The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Again, you'll have links in the description. Now, the journey starts here and ends here. And it explains, the hero's journey explains how there is a common pattern in all myths, in all stories, in all religious stories, in all of the stories of humanity, there is a common pattern. And this pattern is that these stories begin in a space, the ordinary world, and at the beginning something happens, and we've already seen this in the three-act structure. Something happens that breaks the status quo, and there is this threshold, this line in the middle, and once our heroine or hero starts the real journey, they have to enter into the extraordinary world. And here they will go through the road of trials, they will go through all of the issues, all of the problems, they will deal with change, they will deal with resistance, talking about the structure that we already know, until they are ready to face the big enemy, the big wedding, the big monster, the big fight. And finally they go back and they head back to the ordinary world, but they are not the same person. They are changed by this adventure. The whole idea of a hero's journey, it is a journey of learning and of transformation. And as you can imagine, also here we can have the same reference. This quadrant here will be the first act. All of this will be roughly the second act, and the return home will be the third act, like this. So now you have the reference of all of these shapes and how they all say the same thing. Now I've chosen to work with you on this structure here, and this is the structure that I created because I think it's the simplest way to build a business narrative. But behind those business narratives, there is the three-act structure and there is the hero's journey. And so I just wanted to briefly show you, in conclusion, a more in-depth version of all of this. And so this is the whole visualization of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell. And I think the interesting thing is that it actually begins with the call to adventure. So imagine what you're going to do at the beginning of your talk or presentation. You are calling your audience to adventure. There's quite a few moments that, you know, look and sound really amazing, like the magic flight, but actually the magic flight is what you know as what is the summary, because it's showing the world of your journey, the world of your presentation from above. There's, for instance, a lot of the beginning of the journey is about confusion in the belly of the whale in the road of trials, and then there is this step that you want to give your audience at the end of every presentation, this mastery of two worlds. Now, this is referencing Jungian archetypes, and it has a reference in mythology, in mythology of the West, of the East, also primitive mythology. It's much easier to have a look at this other version that I have created for you, where you can see a little bit of the steps of the 8 steps. Now these are 17 steps plus the entry and exit in the topic, where you can see how all of this plays into the simplified structure that I'm suggesting to you. So for instance, here the magic flight becomes the bird's eye view, the moments of confusion become too much information and from chaos to order, and the mastery of two worlds becomes here total mastery. But I just wanted to show you this to tell you that the research that you see summarized in the previous module actually cuts pretty deep, and if you want, in the coaching calls or even here in the course going on, we can go more in depth and analyze all of these aspects together. So thank you so much for watching this more in-depth approach to storytelling. And here is the bird's eye view. Welcome to Advanced Telling Power. Now, I have created this new set of videos because I've noticed that there are some themes that in our conversations are recurring. And I wanted to put these themes into a discrete addition to the storytelling course. We are going to talk about communication in general and what I want to cover with you within the next few videos. And I will create, I would say, 5 videos for this, for all these frames that I've added. So the first video will be about the Dunning Krueger effect and how that explains imposter syndrome. Then I want to talk about the main metrics of good communication style: passive, assertive, aggressive. And then I want to introduce you to a framework of thinking, feeling, being, where I have collected a number of dimensions that are related to thinking, that are related to feeling, and then are related to being. You will notice one thing: the thinking dimensions are way more than the other ones. There's a reason for that, especially there is this levels of articulation that we will go in very much detail. And I would say marketing style, wait till the end, wait till the last video, because most probably the most important metrics of them all is what comes at the end of being, that is self-awareness and situational awareness. It has come up often in our conversations that there is an interplay between the level of knowledge that I have and the level of confidence that I have. Now, on this chart is commonly known as the Dunning Krueger effect, and it's part of a paper from the 2 researchers, Dunning and Krueger, and they never hoped for it to have such an incredible and wide adoption and be quoted so much. Now, here we have our level of confidence going up, and here we have our level of knowledge going up. And what happens at the beginning of an experience, we have low level of confidence and low level of knowledge, and we are in a state of knowing nothing. And the world is kind of telling us exactly that: you know nothing. Now, at the beginning of a learning adventure, what happens usually is that we have this approach called the peak of enthusiasm, where we think, how hard can this be? And it immediately hits us that the more we incrementally learn about a new topic, the more we go down in the valley of despair, where we think we are a phony, a fraud, a fake. Now, this valley of despair literally is the moment where we start feeling the imposter syndrome. And the problem is that the curve that gets us out of the imposter syndrome and out of thinking that we know nothing, it doesn't rise as quickly as this peak of enthusiasm here. It is actually sloping at a very low degree. And even though when we find ourselves here, we will know much more than the average person, we will still know that there's so much more that we still do not know. And this is the reason why the experts will never tell you, I'm a true expert at this, because they know that there's still a path that they need to take. And this is sort of a plateau of sustainability where you might be satisfied enough of your level of knowledge. You actually kind of maxed out at the level of knowledge. This is the maximum knowledge you can get. But guess what? You are never going to get to the highest possible level of confidence. So the highest point of knowledge here doesn't correlate with the highest point of knowledge. It is important to know that a lot of people are using imposter syndrome to justify the fact that they know nothing. They know nothing, okay? So if you can notice your imposter syndrome as you start learning. If you have imposter syndrome at the beginning, it means that you are just starting to learn, right? Okay, so very simple, very straightforward. I think it's useful to have this kind of nomenclature in your minds going forward. Don't get too stuck on this. It's not that important. Just, it's FYI. On to more important things in the next video. Okay, this video is here to do two things. So the first thing is I want to talk about communication style. And the second thing, I want to introduce you to the dimensions that we're going to talk about after. Now, usually when we talk about communication style, we mean passive, assertive, or aggressive communication style. You'll get used to this. I've put all of these communication styles along these continuous lines where the position that I want you to take most of the time is in the middle, and the two extremes are to the left and to the right. Now, assertive communication style is a style that takes into consideration the fact that other people exist, and so it borrows something from the passive, and it also knows that we need to get things done, and therefore we need to be proactive, so it borrows something from the aggressive. Lots of people live somewhere around here in the middle, where they are pretty assertive, but they tend to the passive or they tend to the aggressive. We'll see later on that actually there is something beyond these borders, and we can have a look at it. Now, I've put here some examples that I think help. And let's start from the negative example. So if I want to communicate aggressively and I want to tell you that something needs to be done, what I could do is I could say, this has to be done by tomorrow, no excuses. I don't want to hear it, that it can't be done. Just make it happen. In the aggressive communication, I am not seeing you at all. I am just seeing myself. I'm just being an asshole. Okay. Now, there is a same mirrored version of this aggressive in the passive. Let's have a look at what it looks like. It would be nice if it could be done by tomorrow, but I understand if it's not possible. I see that you're so busy, so I don't really want to disturb you, but it would be really nice if it was done. And as you can see here, I'm using more words even, and I have this self-deprecating way of saying things. The way you want to say things is assertively, and the way you would do this example in the assertive way is say, I need this completed by tomorrow. I know the deadline is tight. Please let me know if you foresee any issues meeting this deadline so we can find a solution together. Being assertive means being clear. I need this completed by tomorrow. I'm not being aggressive. I'm just telling you the things as they are. And then I am also acknowledging the situation, not in a passive way. I know you're very busy. I'm so sorry to disturb you. I know that things are complicated, and so I want to work it out with you. It is a posture where I am saying I have needs, but I'm also saying I see your needs. Now, this is where you want to use storytelling, and this is where you want to communicate in general. Where it's almost impossible to communicate, and oftentimes we find ourselves in these situations, is outside of the bounds of passive and aggressive, where we have violent and passive-aggressive communication. Let's start from the right. Let's start from violent. What would violent look like in this case? I need it done. You will do this by tomorrow, or there will be consequences. So heads will roll. I am just using the fear of violence, fear of layoff, just to get things done. I'm not seeing you. You're just a pawn. And in this situation, oftentimes there isn't any comeback that is assertive or aggressive that works. What usually happens if somebody is violent or aggressive, we revert to the passive position. So if somebody is being aggressive with us, what will usually happen is that we will go in the passive. And so if they are aggressive, we have to be passive. And it could also happen if they're violent, we might go into the passive aggressive. What does passive aggressive look like? We've all gotten passive aggressive from our parents, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting how some people think deadlines don't apply to them. If we all had the luxury of time, but unfortunately, I need this done by tomorrow. And so you see that I am starting to manipulate in the passive aggressive. This is a style where I am not being honest. I'm trying to push you and trying to push your buttons. The typical example of passive aggressive is you come home at 3 a.m. and your mom is up and telling you, I couldn't sleep a moment thinking that you were out. Do you want me to die? Do you want to harm me so much? Come back earlier. This is the type of communication where it's very hard to come back with an assertive style because it's so far away from where we feel comfortable and it's so far away from where it's fair to communicate. And so in summary, it's important for us to understand that these styles of communication exist, but this is not the only dimension of communication. And so in the next 3 videos, I will go deep into what are the dimensions of communication that we can think, what are the dimensions of communication that reside in our hearts, that we can feel, that are more emotional. So actually they reside in the limbic system back here, or the things that reside in the body, the dimensions that we can be. And this is going to be, I think, an interesting exploration. I'll try to add examples off the cuff for all of these. There are about 30 dimensions coming up, and they are pretty interesting and pretty entertaining. And I think a lot of them are pretty eye-opening. So I think you'll love hearing about them. So I'll meet you in the next video that is about thinking, then a video on feeling, and then a video on being. So in this video, I would like to explore the 10 dimensions of thinking. Now, what we can do with our brains in communication is not that important. And even though it's not that important, that's where we have the most control, because we have less control over our emotions and even less control over our body, because our body will react to our mindset, while there's these 10 dimensions that really depend on how we think things through. So I think these, even though they don't matter as much, they are the ones where we can spend actually more time devising things as architects of our communication, if that makes sense, and that kind of help us. They make it, they can calm us down. They can have a calming effect if we go through all of these rational things, because they can give us a sense of control. So let's look at the initial dimensions. So the first dimension I want to talk about is clarity. So when we are talking, we can talk very clearly. And sometimes we are not using enough words. Like, this is what I want to tell you. I haven't told you anything. And sometimes we can say, clarity is, using just enough words, just the right concepts for you to understand. That works. Or I could go on and on and on the concept of clarity and become verbose. Now, of all of these dimensions, it obviously depends on the context. If I'm in the presence of a very important person, I want to be in the range of succinct. If I am giving a lecture for 4 hours, I obviously am going to be more in the direction of verbose, but I'm trying to be concise most of the time. Now, very much connected with this, it's not only about how many words I use, but what kind of words I use. And we get to the level of articulation. Now here I have presented the level of articulation the way I see it, and then in a visualization coming from Blake Lagrange from college. Now the way I see it is that I can articulate something in very simple language, like we're here to get better at communication, or I can use eloquent language. I can say that storytelling is a great tool to understand the power of communication, or I can do it in an erudite kind of way. I can say that the power of myth is often misinterpreted because of the archetypical nature of the story tropes. Now, obviously, for each of these levels, I'm talking to a different audience. But now let's have a look and let's expand this into what Blake calls the 5 levels of articulation. So I have 5 levels. They are going from basic to erudite. Let's start with level 1. At level 1, I am blunt, street, rude, direct action, obvious, truthful, poisonous, powerful. At the level of blunt, if you can add, hey, yo, at the beginning of the sentence, then that is blunt. It's what you would say on the street. It's what you read on an ad. The level 2 articulation is how a child talks. It's simple, easy to understand, elementary level, clear. It's also commanding, it's enticing, because it's simple, it's direct. It's not as blunt, it's not offensive, but it's direct. And if you think about it, also in advertising, there's a lot of direct language. Click here, do this, book a call now. All of this is between blunt and child. Then there's the area where most of us live, and that is in the level 3, educated, refined, polite, sophisticated, clever, safe, formulaic, politically correct. This is where business speak starts. So if you're in the office, you usually communicate at a level 3. But what if you want to impress people? Then you go to the level of thought leader, level 4. Theoretical, conceptualizing, impressive, unaccommodating. And here, maybe there's a complex lecture, you want to show off all the knowledge that you have. But let's say that you want to talk just to people like you, just to people that have exactly the same level of knowledge that you have. You can go to the expert level, to all the way to erudition. So technical, geeky, babbling idiot, scholarly, academic. So these are levels to keep in mind for a variety of reasons. The first reason is that you can jump through levels. And a great way to jump through levels is storytelling. You can have a level 1 hook that gets to people to a level 3 articulation, that gets people to a level 5 erudition very quickly. And this is, you can use the hero's journey, you can use the storytelling mountain to get people through different levels. So think about storytelling as a sort of elevator that allows you to go up and down these levels. And then, since we know that our communication is for our audience, it's not for us, it's not to clarify our thoughts, it's to clarify their thoughts. Now, this is where these levels of articulation play a fantastic role. Now, let me give you a few examples starting from level 3, because I think level 3 is the one that level 3 is the one that I'm using right now. This is the level in the middle, is this eloquent kind of communication. Now, at level 3, the example I have is it can be lonely up top. If we go down a notch, at the child level, being in charge means being alone. It's more literal, it's more direct. But at level 1, it's catchy, it's blunt, it's powerful. Top dogs fly solo. I could add, yo, top dogs fly solo. And top dog is a kind of street language. But then if we go at the level 4, you see solitude is frequently observed as a concomitant of ascending to high-ranking position within organizational or social structures. And it's even more babbly and idiotic when I go to level 5. As you climb the ranks, the air gets rarefied as the opportunities to share openly your issues with your peers don't exist. Everyone is evaluating you and few people are on your side. Top managers are profoundly impacted by the lack of allies. The eloquent way of saying this is it can be lonely up top. This is why we have kind of adopted this. And this is something that I've often talked about. This is a great framing for this concept, in the same way that imposter syndrome is a great framing of the Dunning Krueger effect. It can be lonely up top is a great framing for this kind of concept, or like storytelling is a great framing for a way of persuading people. So in this sense, it is extremely powerful to use these levels of articulation. So right now we covered clarity and articulation level. We could talk about this at length. Let's go to the other dimension. Now, you know a lot about this dimension because it's storytelling. So in storytelling, you can have a fixed repetitive structure that is pretty boring immediately to the ears of the people in front of you. You can have a freestyle, kind of confusing way of structuring things. So you can say, so there's a lot of things I could need to talk to you about, but the most important is this one. Oh no, hold on, there's this other thing I need to talk to you about. Or there is a structured way of saying things, saying, I have 10 dimensions right now. I want you to focus on 3 of those dimensions. Well, actually, it's not true, but I want you to focus on all 10. But for instance, I told you, I'm going to talk to you about 10 dimensions. I'm not going to say, oh, here's another dimension. So this is why you want to try to stay structured. And what does it mean to stay structured? It means that you are using the storytelling mountain. So of all of this, you already have all of the materials. Now, there's another dimension that is about your brain, about thinking, is what is happening in the room in terms of you and the other people. So right now, I am the coach, the teacher, and I'm teaching you. My role is aligned with who I am, and it's true, and it's very clear. Okay, and so it's very easy for me to express my value because I am who I need to be. But sometimes I will get into a room and my role is fuzzy, unclear. Or sometimes I will get into a room and somebody will say, you take notes. And they impose a role on me. And I think it's always important to acknowledge that the level of alignment of our role in a certain situation will determine our level of confidence and our level of feeling. And so if we can work on our role in advance and make sure that in every communication situation, our role is as aligned as possible, as clear as possible, and it's as true as possible, it's not imposed by others, the better our communication will be. Now, deep in the brain, this is something that I have observed in many people, and it's a question that I often ask a specific type of client. What is your thinking style? Because your thinking style will determine the way you organize information in your head, and it will determine the way you communicate this information. So there's a lot of people that are purely conceptual thinkers. So what they have in their minds is something completely abstract. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some people that are completely visual thinkers. So if you tell them you're on a desert island, they will feel, they will see the island, they'll completely visualize it. They will have this image, this cinematic image in their heads. And there's a lot of people that think in words. I don't know what happened here. That think in words. I'm not saying that one of these is better than the others. What I'm saying is try to think for yourself. If you are in a sort of engineering position, you might be a conceptual thinker. If you are more in an artistic professional, you might be more of a visual thinker. If you are like me, digging very deep on complex things, literature, storytelling, humanistic studies, you probably are a verbal thinker. Most probably we are a mix of all of these, so there isn't such a division. But it's important to acknowledge that this will have an impact in the way you organize the information for your audience and will have an impact in the way you communicate it to your audience. Let's continue the roller coaster of dimensions. So the next dimension is fantasy. So there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of fantasy. They just want to see the world as it is. And they're going to use things that actually exist in the world. Their fantasy is dry, absent. And there are some people that have an exaggerated fantasy and that they're daydreaming all the time. And they're going to struggle to paint an image for me to see and understand what they're talking about. And so your level of fantasy will determine your level of clarity with other people. And there are some people that are imaginative and they know that they need to translate this into words and body language and eye contact in order for their audience to understand what they're talking about. And so how much fantasy you bring, and even if you say, oh, but I don't have a lot of fantasy, you can force yourself a little bit in the direction of being imaginative. And if you're too imaginative, you need to know that people won't understand so well what you're talking about. Then, on this imaginative spectrum, there's also your preference for visuals. So some people will only develop very simplistic, rudimentary visuals, and they might be effective. What I know it's not effective is complex, confusing visuals. Now, these are always a no-go in communication. And what you want to always strive for is easy, impactful visuals. Like, for instance, when you present a graph, you want to explain this graph to people, like I've been doing with this kind of visualization. Then there's still a few dimensions that I want to talk to you about. The first one is curiosity. How curious you are will influence the way that you research your topic and the way you present it to people. And your audience will know if you are careless, if you really don't care about the topic, if you are curious, or if you are intrusive, if you want to go too much in the direction of knowing about the people that are in front of you and drilling them with questions and so on. So always bring a healthy curiosity to your communication situations. One of the most powerful things you can do as a communicator is just asking questions. If you're able to ask questions in a situation, people will think that you have a higher IQ. People will think that you are a better leader. And so if you express a healthy curiosity towards the people and towards the situation that you're in, this will most probably be the best hack, the best communication hack, the tactical communication hack that I can give you. Now, there's another couple of metrics that you can control rationally. So let's go with these two last metrics. The first one is persuasion. So when you are talking, depending on how passionate you are about the topic that you're talking about, you can be uninspiring, you can be persuasive, or you can be manipulative. We've already seen manipulation up in the communication styles. I think it's important for you to know that when you are being uninspiring, just to self-assess and try to understand, is it because the role doesn't align with who I am? Is it because I don't have the knowledge? I don't know enough? Is it because I don't know the audience in front of me? But obviously, you always want to strive to be persuasive. And finally, an aspect that is very dear to my heart is cultural sensitivity, whereas we are trying to use language to include more and more people, more and more minorities into the way we communicate. And so you could be biased. You could use exclusive language. Like today, we can say mankind, but it would be better to say humankind. Whenever we talk about an example, we can say he, the boss, she, the boss, or we can say they, the boss. So we have many ways of being inclusive, and they come for free, and they make people feel better. So I would say that just having better cultural sensitivity is something that everybody should do. This is not going to be a course about diversity and inclusion, but I do invite you. And if you want a good reference for great courses on diversity and inclusion, please let me know, and I will talk to you about that. So what we did is we went through these 10 metrics of the thinking. So this was just the thinking. Clarity, how clear you are, how articulate you are, how structured you are with your story, how clear and aligned and true you are with your role. What your thinking style is, it doesn't matter which one it is, it's important to know. How much fantasy you are, how much fantasy you have, how imaginative you are, how you use visuals. Are they too rudimentary, too complex, or just easy and impactful? How you use your curiosity to your advantage, how persuasive you are and why are you persuasive, and how inclusive you are culturally. So this was thinking. In the next videos, we'll explore feeling and being. In this second grouping of 8 dimensions, I wanted to put together everything that we are feeling. In this case, these dimensions stem more or less from who we are. We might have a limited control over them, but we can have full awareness over them. So it's still important to go through this list. And if you realize that you're particularly lacking in one of those, you might go in the direction of working specifically on one of these skills. And most of them can be, with a little bit of patience, trained as well. So let's go through these 8 dimensions together. Now, you are all familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, and you could be completely rational, totally careless, like a Vulcan in Star Trek, or you could be overly emotional and become anxious about everything that happens around you. This will be a problem in communication because people will feel your discomfort. We feel each other's emotions, and this is why it's important, especially in communication, to be in the center and being empathetic, recognizing what is happening. And oftentimes, if we are the leaders of the room, it's really important to recognize what is happening for our audience. If our audience is somehow impacted by something that is happening, it's very important for us as leaders to recognize their situation. Then another thing that we might not be able to change is our orientation in terms of introversion or extroversion, or our ability to switch between one and the other, which is being an ambivert. Now, nobody probably is a complete introvert. Nobody is really a complete extrovert. We find ourselves in different situations. When I'm on stage, I act very much in the direction of extroversion. I might appear to be over here. In reality, I'm somewhere in this region most of the time, but I'm able to move around whenever needed. And by the way, if you're an introvert and you think that the extroverts have it much easier, think again, because as an introvert, it's slightly easier to become an extrovert and to use your energy on stage, to use your energy in a big meeting, than it is for the extrovert to go in a room and sit alone for 6 to 10 hours and do something focused without any specific contact with anybody else. So think about this fact that as an introvert, you recharge your batteries here, but you can discharge them here. As an extrovert, you charge your batteries here, but then you will deplete them very quickly if you're completely in an introverted situation. Now, another part that is usually can be controlled rationally, but I put it under the heart, is your negotiation skills. Now, in terms of negotiation skills, I think there is a generalistic posture that you will have. So you might be very ego-centered or very altruistic, or what they teach in the negotiation skills courses is that what you want to do is you want to be empathetic, therefore you want to be present in the negotiation situation. You want to understand the parts, and we'll see it later, act as an ambassador. A lot of these dimensions overlap with each other. Knowing where you stand in terms of negotiation skills, especially, let's say, if you're an introvert and you don't like negotiation and you don't like conflict, you're most probably going to be in the self-centered part of this spectrum. Try to understand what you need to do to become more present. I think this is something that is going to be very, very useful. This goes hand in hand with your listening skills. They can be trained, but it's important to know if you are completely closed to the outside world, if you are totally open in the other direction and you can be convinced of anything, you're gullible, or if you're simply open and you are able to listen to people and not think of what you have to say to reply, but actually really listen to them, which is a good exercise, especially for us coaches, because we want to provide advice, but we want to make sure that we're always listening. And so If you are preparing your reply as you're listening to people, you're probably more in the closed spectrum. If you're completely able to open up to people, then you are really right at the middle, and that's exactly where you would like to be. In communication, there's another important element that comes into play is how you play with a team. And in this case, you could be a solo star. And some communicators are solo stars and they are able to get incredible results as solo stars. So not necessarily bad, but in a team, you will stand out. Some people, on the other hand, need the energy of the group in order to function. They're gregarious. And if you find yourself being gregarious and sometimes you have to lead the group, you will have to get away from this gregarious energy and borrow a little bit of the solo star energy. And ideally, the team player is the one that embodies both the ability to lead others, but also to understand the energy that is in the room and to relate to the energy that is in the room. Similarly to negotiation skills, conflict management is something where you will have a natural posture. Some people are avoiding conflict as much as possible. They maintain a neutral posture. So they don't want to find themselves in conflict. Some people, on the other hand, love to pick a fight. And they're striving to find conflict where they can hone their skills. They can have a dialogue. Maybe because they are very extroverted, maybe because they think while they speak, and they will be more in search of conflict in order to clarify their thoughts, in order to just be themselves and express themselves. And the ideal position, similarly as we saw in the orientation, similar as we saw in the negotiation skills, is that we want to be in the middle. We want to be present and we want to be in an ambassadorial position towards the conflict that is happening, understanding the parties, understanding yourself, understanding the other party, and finding the compromise that is needed. We have another two metrics that are humor and facilitation. Now, humor, again, some people have a sense of humor, some people don't. Some people are funny, some people are less funny. Even though comedy can be learned, even though it sort of resides under the skin, so it's quite interesting. And your humor could be completely absent, it could be terribly offensive, or it could be also inclusive. So you can use it. You don't need to have humor in order to be a great communicator. It is one of the emotional tools to break down the barriers of your audience. If you know that you're not funny, don't try to be funny because you're going to set yourself for failure. But know that this is one of the dimensions that people use and people play with when they are communicating, especially when they're communicating on stage. And finally, if you are in a meeting room, consider the fact that most probably there is somebody, possibly you, that has to take the facilitation role. This means that they need to simplify the flow of information, the use of time, and organize the room, organize the work for other people. And sometimes you will go into the room and you will have a passive facilitation role. So you will let people self-organize. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. Sometimes you want to be active. You want to say, we're going to use 30 minutes for this, another 30 minutes for this, and then we're going to take a break and so on. And some people are straight up bossy in these facilitation situations. They just boss people around. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. So you want to know if you can be in this spectrum here. It's absolutely the ideal if you can be in this spectrum here, because when you obviously if you have an uncontrollable crowd, you have to move a little bit in the assertive direction of facilitation, but sometimes you want to let people also self-organize. So I believe these are all things you can observe, and it would be great for you to observe in your communication. Are you empathetic in terms of emotional intelligence? Are you using your strengths and your weaknesses to your advantage in terms of intro and extroversion? Do you think about your negotiation skills? Are you training your listening skills? What kind of person are you with the team? Are you a good player? Similarly to negotiation, how are you dealing with conflict? Are you neutral, a warrior, or an ambassador? Do you use humor? And if so, do you use it bluntly or elegantly? And whenever you're in a room, are you assuming this role of helping others feel better, helping others understand better what they're going to do? Are you an active facilitator? Are you a passive facilitator? Or does it happen to you to boss people around? So in the next video, we will go into the body in the being dimensions. See you there. Okay, now we're going to spend a little bit of time on these 10 dimensions of being. I call them being because they more or less all stem from the body. The first thing that stems from the body is the voice. Then there's the body language itself. And then in general, our awareness in regards to what is happening. I'm going to first describe them to you, and then we're going to use some examples just to understand what I mean by all of these dimensions. Speaking about the voice, it's pretty obvious that depending on the situation I'm in, I will need to use a different volume. So if I'm in a small room, I can be more quiet. If I'm in a big room, I can be louder. In terms of modulation, and modulation includes the speed, the pitch, the melody, the accent that I'm using, and so on. I can be very flat, very monotone, or I can be very much over the top, or I can have a healthy variation in the way I speak. So I'm not pronouncing every word in the same way. Varied is the way that I'm speaking right now. Now, in terms of pitch, so the way that our voice goes up and down, this is what really impacts being monotonous. Because if we're always using the same pitch, and we'll demonstrate it in a second, it's going to be very boring. If we, for instance, if we think about people that speak a very specific dialect, oftentimes a dialect will come with a specific way of structuring the phrase. And it has a sort of melody, da 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 da. And they will bring this to different languages. And so you will hear an Italian melody in somebody who speaks French, and it will sound wrong. And the fact that it's repetitive, all of the phrases have the same melody, it will produce the effect of being boring. Then another dimension of modulation that you can change is your speed. Because if you want to say something that is not very important, you can say it really fast. But whenever there's a really important concept, you really got to slow all the way down. And this is also connected with how expressive you are. Again, if you are monotone, you will have no expression in your voice. Or if you're completely over the top, you're going to exaggerate everything, or your expressiveness can be just right. Now, this is very much something you will need to feel. Okay? And when I say this is something that you will need to feel, I'm using all of these aspects. For instance, in terms of speed, I'm using a pause. This is something that you're going to feel. Then I'm using pitch. I'm going down at the beginning. This is something. And then I'm going up that you're going to, and then feel. I'm going slightly up with the pitch. And I'm using just a bit of expressiveness. Just a feel. I'm putting an accent on this F at the beginning. And so I'm trying to vary my modulation by changing the pitch. I'm also not just pausing, slowing down. You're going to feel. I'm changing the speed. And you can see that you can do all of these things. You can be completely flat, monotonous, very boring. You can also add the same repetitive melody. You can also repeat all the phrases in the same way. You can also speak exactly the same thing over and over again, and so on. So there's all of these dimensions you can hear from your own recordings. So this is why it's really important to record yourself. There is a number of hours. I think there's around 100 hours of your voice that you need to hear. After that, it's not going to be as annoying to hear your voice recorded. There's the physical structure of our cranium causes our voice to sound different in our ears than it sounds to the rest of the world. This causes a cognitive disconnect, which makes it fastidious, annoying to hear your voice. After you hear yourself for a few hundred hours, you're going to be fine. You can hear your voice without cringing. So start doing that because it's going to get better. It's like exercising, okay? At the beginning, you're going to do it with an empty barbell, and at some point you'll put 100 kilo on the barbell. Now, the earliest you start, the earliest you can get to the 100 kilos on the barbell. Okay, so let's move into the body. With the body, I want to talk about presence, spontaneity, and eye contact. Now, your presence on stage, especially if you're going to give a talk or if you're giving a video where you've allowed a little bit more space for the body, because actually here I really have sacrificed my physical presence to a really, really tiny slice. People will notice if you are overly theatrical, if you are always standing still, or if you're naturally expressive. In the same way, if you have made a plan for your body language, people will understand if you're being spontaneous, if you're being natural, or if you're being completely disconnected, you're terrified, you're like completely fixed, or if you're just exaggerating, maybe also because you're very fearful. And the other aspect that is very important, it's important in videos, it's important especially on stage, is your eye contact. So if you have an audience in front of you, if you're jumping from audience to audience to audience to audience while you're just talking, this is going to be very confusing for your audience because they won't know who you're addressing. They'll see that you're trying to address everybody, but you're jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping. And it also looks really bad in video. On the other hand, if you're just looking at the people in the front row, we won't feel included. Now, we're doing a video here. I'm softly gazing at my screen and more or less in the direction of my camera. Actually, right now, I'm going to try to just look at my camera. I don't think it feels as natural as softly looking at the screen where I have the information that I'm sharing with you. The way to have an inclusive eye contact in the case of being in a theater is by addressing the different parts of the room. So the front, the back, the left, the center, and the right in different moments. And therefore, speak a sentence to one group, then move to another group for another sentence, for another concept, then move to another group for another sentence, another concept. Now my eye contact is going to my lovely eagle that is flying up above this morning. So just another demonstration that if you start looking somewhere else, people will notice immediately. These are the dimensions of the body. Now, if we were in a theatrical course, we will talk about many, many, many more dimensions of the body, but let's have these dimensions suffice for now. Now I want to talk to you about maybe the two most important dimensions of all of these, and that is self-awareness. Now, if you have a connected self-awareness while you're communicating, you're winning the whole game. So this is the one metric that solves all the others. The big problem that we often have when we are communicating is that we are too worried, too anxious, and we lack our self-awareness, or we are completely in the ego. And so we are unable to communicate to the people in front of us because we are so much with ourselves, our fear, etc. And you will hear this still at a lot of conferences. There is going to be a lot of people that start their talk by requesting empathy from the audience and by saying, this is my first talk, I'm pretty scared, so please encourage me, etc., etc. What they're saying is that their fear is more important than anything else. And what I'm hearing is a lot of ego trying to get an easy clap, but I'm not getting any value from that. And so what you want when you are heading into especially a high stakes communication situation is to bring all of your self-awareness. If you are aware, if you are there in the moment, this all category is called being. If you're there in the moment, you can grow your situational awareness. If you have situational awareness, you can deal with a change of plan. You can deal with things going wrong. You can deal with a projector stopping to work. You can deal with somebody who rejects your idea. You can deal with an aggression. If you are situationally aware, you can negotiate better. You can be more calm. You can be more concise. You can be more clear. You can have a better role. This is the one domino that if you get here, you get everything. But guess what? This is not a learned thing. It's an earned thing. And it's not a technique. It's not a set of technique. It's a mindset. And this is why it takes so long to go through all of the rest of the exercises just to get to this, the situational awareness. And so when you realize that you are in a certain communication situation and you are detaching, there's something going wrong, and you are getting reactive or disconnect. You disconnect because we disconnect when we feel pain. We don't like to feel pain, so we disconnect. When you notice that, try to lean into this discomfort. Try to go towards the awareness, because there you will have all of the goodies. There you will have the ability to integrate a disruptor, to fix the technical problem by improvising. You will have the ability to deal with any unpredictable change in plans, and you'll have the ability to continue being empathetic and to continue being yourself and continue being connected with the people in front of you. So I hope that this was useful. We talked about the voice. So in terms of volume, in terms of, in general, modulation, everything is in a way that we do with a voice as a modulation, even the volume is a modulation. But especially important in modulation is pitch. There's different meanings also culturally of the pitch. So a low pitch means authority. It's very important to listen to this message. But if we go high, it means that, for instance, in English, in Italian, in French, when we go high at the end, it's a question. I am the most important storytelling expert. I am the most important storytelling expert. One is I'm saying it. The other one is I'm asking the question. So it's very important how we use the pitch. Then the speed. The speed determines a lot. Because if it's not very important, I can tell you very quickly. But if it's truly fundamental, I need to slow down. And in the speed, there are pauses. There's a lot of elements that are also parts of being expressive and trying to put meaning into our voice as well. Not just in the words, but put meaning in the voice. Then there's how present we are with our body, how natural we are with our body. When you put yourself behind a podium, you're not natural anymore. Okay, you've become one with furniture. And what you want to do instead, you want to feel like you're at home, you're at ease, you're just being yourself. And then this technical thing, unfortunately, is really technical. It's my worst nightmare is eye contact. But eye contact is really important, especially in video, especially in front of an audience. And then finally, if you can develop the right mindset and become the right person to communicate efficiently, then you will develop this self-awareness and finally the situational awareness to be at ease, empathetic, and connected in all communication situations. So I really hope you enjoyed this part of the course where we had all of these dimensions. And obviously there's the Miro board link in all of those videos. And so you can go in detail, and you're very welcome to come to the sessions and ask me questions on all of these. I'm sure we can talk at length about each of these dimensions.